video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up a min and max automation sum based on the BuyBox. Now, as you know, Profit Protector Pro can work out your minimum and maximum prices for you, provided that these sums are set up and set up correctly. And it just saves you a load of time when it comes to getting your items ready for repricing. So the key things, as you know, is minimum, maximum prices and repricing strategies. Now, you get that done a whole lot quicker if you've got things like this set up. So using this alongside one of the bulk ways of setting a repricing strategy means that manually setting this stuff for your items is going to be a lot easier and a lot quicker, because of course what you can do is apply these sums to everything in your inventory. So as I say, today we are going to be focusing on having the BuyBox as our core element, and I'm going to be giving you some advice on things to bear in mind when setting this up, and some good ways to set this up as well. Of course, I can't tell you exactly what to do because you know your inventory and your goals a lot better than me, but I can advise you of some things to bear in mind as you are setting this up. So I'll just be giving you some rough guidelines and I'll let you do the rest. So why would we want to, base these sums on the BuyBox? Why would we want to do that? Well, ultimately, the main point of having Profit Protector Pro is to compete for the BuyBox. So it makes logical sense to me to base your minimum and maximum prices on the BuyBox. So of course you are accounting for that, and the best way to compete and to reprice is to have the BuyBox factored in and setting your parameters around it. That's the best way Profit Protector Pro competes, because if the BuyBox is outside of your parameters, then there's only so much it's going to do and you're not really going to see much in the way of results. So it just makes sense to have the BuyBox as the centerpiece between your set parameters. Now, the thing to bear in mind with this, where you wouldn't really have to worry about this as much if you say set break even or ROI or profit margin, is especially for the minimum price, you don't want to set this too low, okay? Because yes, it's great to focus the sum on the BuyBox and, for example, have your minimum price somewhat below, but you have to bear in mind that you have to do it in a one size fits all kind of way. So you have to think kind of generally about this and what's going to be the most beneficial for most or all of your products, okay? So yes, having the minimum price below the BuyBox might work out great for a load of items, but there could also be a chunk of your inventory as well that might suffer from having the minimum price rule set in a certain way, whereby it's really eating into your profit margins, or what you really don't want is for your minimum price to be like your break-even price or like a penny above it or something like that, because ultimately you want to make some money, and that's what Profit Protector Pro is going to help you do. So be very, very careful how you set your minimum price. And a key bit of advice that I'm going to really emphasize to you right here, right now, is no matter how you set up these sums, however it is you do it, whatever you base it on, whatever you set as the plus or minus or the extra conditions, it doesn't matter how you set up the sums. When you have edited a sum or made them completely afresh, I will always advise you to test out the automated calculations on one or two items before you apply to everything in your inventory, because it will be a huge mess which can't really be reverted. Well, not easily, at least. It would require a lot of manual adjustment, or going back and forth then with these sums until it all seems right to you, which of course takes time. And if you've got things actively repricing as well, then of course it's not good news. So don't mess up your inventory by lack of due diligence. Check 1, 2, 3 items, how they automate and how Profit Protector Pro works out the minimum and maximum to ensure you are happy with the way it calculates. With the items that you're testing it on, I would say choose some that are quite different. So ones with a relatively low BuyBox, like a much cheaper item, and like a more expensive item as well, where the BuyBox is quite different. So test 2, 3 completely different items with different pricings, and see how it works out, see what you're happy with. Then you can go back, make some small tweaks, and then retest again and see how you like the way it's calculating. And of course, when you get to that point where you are happy with what it's doing, you can then apply to everything in your inventory. That would be my key advice to you. Anyway, let's go on with setting up. So core element of BuyBox, right? Makes sense. We are basing our minimum maximum prices around this, and it just means that we are going to be, super competitive, because obviously we have the BuyBox as the centerpiece for our sums. Now, if you are wanting to have your minimum price below the BuyBox, which is what I would personally advise in most cases, I would say you don't need to go too far below, because of course, remember, you don't want to go too far below where it's close to your break even, or hardly anywhere above it, because you want to be making some money, but you also want to be competitive. You want to have that competitive edge. So having a minimum price just below the BuyBox is an amazing way to ensure that the repricing strategy that you're using can pick up the BuyBox by going just underneath. Now, when I say this, I'm mostly thinking of the aggressive repricing strategies, but even if you set one that matches the BuyBox, having it just a little bit below the BuyBox isn't a bad thing, because let's say you're using the balance sales accumulator, which focuses on matching the BuyBox. If that doesn't quite work on that listing, and it shifts its approach to working against your key competitors on the listing, having that little bit of leeway just underneath the BuyBox, and let's say another seller is there, is going to allow Profit Protect Pro to compete with that seller, and who knows, through doing that you may then win the BuyBox. So I wouldn't really say to go anywhere above 20-25% when you are using the subtract, okay? But my advice to you would be to basically just go small with this. So maybe 5 to 10% would be ideal in this case, but of course you do what feels right for you. You know your inventory a lot better than me, so maybe I want to go just a little bit below the BuyBox. Let's go for 10%. Now, what you could also do here is go for the or at least option, and then have that as minus £1 or $1, whatever currency you're working with, because then either it will do the minus 10%, or if you know that it's safe in pretty much every case to go £1 or $1 below the BuyBox, and you'll still make money if you sold for that minimum price, then having something like that is also good too, because let's say subtracting that like 10% isn't going to produce as effective a minimum price as say this would, then Profit Protect Pro's got the choice to use either this segment of the sum or this segment based on what it can do or what it's best for it to do, whichever one makes the most strategic sense. So that's what you can do with the or at least function. With the and at least function, I would only say to use this if you want it to do both, if you want to subtract a certain percentage and then a certain amount. But in this particular case, I wouldn't say that and at least is super necessary to set. So having it at no further conditions is good enough. If you want to do something that little bit extra with the sum, I would say having or at least is the better choice in this particular scenario, but of course it's completely up to you. Now, if you do want to try and sort of win the BuyBox at a slightly higher price point, which can be possible, I would say plus anywhere up to 10% as your minimum price, and that's what your minimum price will be. So this is particularly effective if, say, you happen to have lots of listings where your FBA and your competition is merchant fulfilled, right? Having your minimum price slightly above the BuyBox can still win the BuyBox, okay? So if you do want to go slightly above with your minimum price, I would say anywhere up to 10% is sensible, whereby it's still going to be effective strategy wise, and thinking of it in a competitive sense, this is a pretty good idea if you are going to do it this way. You could also use the or at least option again, and maybe, plus £1 or $1 or whatever currency you're working with. So you could do it that way as well, and then it would do one or the other based on what makes most sense. So you could do that here as well. You could use and at least if you wanted it to be 10% and I don't know 50 cents or 50p or whatever. You could do it like that, and it will use both parts. So the minimum price will be 10% above the buy box and whatever you've set in here. But I would say keep it very small with what you're entering in here. Okay. So if I just do it, say, like that, I'd be happy with that. Now, my maximum prices will be calculated with the buy box plus minus. Now, obviously, it doesn't make too much sense to be just below the buy box with your maximum price because obviously, if your parameters are like both of them, if they are below the buy box, you can win the buy box by having having Profit Protects Pro be your max price, but you're not going to be able to increase the price from that point onwards, whereas other people could do that, and it's not going to be very effective at all. So I wouldn't say in this case to really minus anything. Always have a plus for this one is my key advice to you. Now, in terms of what you set here, I would say anything. It's quite a large window, or largish window that I'm giving you here. Anything from say 20 to 70, 80% makes sense. The reason why I wouldn't say do 100% is because if you look at this, let's say the buy box was $50 and we go ahead and add 100%. Okay. 100 as the max price. That is quite a ways from 50, and as you know, Amazon will crack down on you if you are repricing to a price that is just completely, disproportionate with everything else on that listing. You have to be very careful with this, otherwise, you aren't eligible to, be a featured offer. Worst case scenario, if that's then not rectified, you'll end up with more warnings from Amazon. You might end up getting removed from the listing down the line. Just be very careful with the max price. So if it was say 50 and we are adding 20%, 60, that seems very sensible to me. Let's say the buy box was $9.95 and then we add say 50%, $14.92, which to me seems like a reasonable max price. So that's why I say anything in the window of say 20 through to 80% makes sense. If you're not sure, I would perhaps meet in the middle and go for something like 40-50%. Okay, so it's completely up to you how you want to do this. Let's go for 40 in this instance. And at least, or at least are both very feasible options for this as well, because it could be that if this isn't really the better option to do with working out your max price, maybe going, £5 above the buy box. That makes sense to me, and I can't see that really triggering any negative response from Amazon, potentially anywhere up to 10. I wouldn't go too far past this point, because then I think that would be pushing the boundary a little bit with Amazon. So you could have that set that way, or if you wanted to do a smaller percentage, say, and then have and at least, you could also do something like this, and that seems very feasible to me. So I would say anywhere from, as I say, 20 to 80% as your window. So choose any percentage within there, whatever makes most sense to you, and use it. You can use a calculator like I just did there to see what potentially would happen with different buy box prices and so forth. So, set it up like that. And at least, or at least, are both also feasible options here. And with both, I would say anywhere up to $10, anywhere up to €10. Again, you're going to know your inventory a lot better than me, but just thinking generally, this sort of thing makes sense to me. So if I have it like this, save all changes. Don't forget to save your changes when you're done. And if we go to a listing, let's do this one right here. So we're then getting it to calculate our price. Bear in mind, the sum is based on BuyBox. If you have a listing where the BuyBox is suppressed, and the BuyBox isn't present, then of course it doesn't have that key element to work this out. Okay, so therefore, if it fails, that'll be why, because there's no BuyBox. So bear that in mind. And so we can see here it's worked out a minimum price and a maximum price. Now, having the minimum price just a little bit below the BuyBox in this kind of range seems very sensible to me. We have that slightly competitive edge if we need it, if we need to go under, if we need to undercut, and our maximum price at $34.99. Now, this is just over £10 in this case. Okay, it doesn't seem like totally disproportionate. Maybe I might lower that down to 30% in this case, but of course, thinking generally, and if that's the way it's going to be for most of my items, then having it at that kind of max price doesn't seem too out of line to me. Of course, if Amazon does send you any feedback about any of your items, then it might just be a case of tweaking your min and max prices once again, and lowering it just a little bit. But using these rough guidelines I've given you, you can set a very effective minimum maximum pricing rule. Okay, and that's how you can base a min and max automation sum off of the BuyBox effectively.